From WHQR Public Media, this is the Newsroom. I'm your host, Rachel Keith. Thanks for joining us. Hugh McManus has been in education for over 40 years. He's worked as a teacher, assistant principal, and principal in Pender, Columbus, and New Hanover County schools. He's also been the director of a local private school. And most recently, he was elected a New Hanover County School Board member in 2020. His last day on the dais was earlier this December. It was Stephanie Walker and Stephanie Craybill's last day, too. Former board chair Pete Wildeboer said the first order of business was to thank them for their service.
Next, we're going to be honoring three wonderful people that mean a lot to us all, have worked very hard for the last 4 years, and we're not going to cry. We promise that, so we're not going to do that.
Wildeboer, a Republican, recognized McManus, a Democrat, as the person who gave him his start in Pender County.
One of his biggest mistakes was to hire me, but a long time ago I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this guy. So.
During today's interview, McManus talked about his relationship with Wildeboer and said that even though they disagreed politically, that didn't get in the way of their longtime friendship. And there were plenty of heated political disagreements during McManus's 4 years on the board. Some of those charged moments were when he staunchly opposed banning the book Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, written by Jason Reynolds, and pushed back on policies he felt infringed on the First Amendment rights of students and staff. He said the outgoing board was working on a policy regulating cell phones and said he hoped the next board would pick up where they left off. McManus was also vocal about the district focusing on proficiency scores, i.e., how well the students did, and not just growth ones, which shows how much they improved. During the interview, he also said he believes public education is in trouble. He calls for the community, the county, and the state to support the public system through funding and respect for the professionalism of its staff. Since his educational path is coming to a close, he said he'll devote more time to supporting the work of the Salvation Army, and he says he'll be hunting and fishing more, another one of his passions. Hugh McManus, thanks for joining us on the Newsroom today.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to start with, how did you view school and teachers when you were a young man?
They had a really less challenging job than I think they did today, not with the understanding of what their goals were as far as academics, but just the nature of what has transpired that goes on in the schools and the discipline and the politics and parents, and I think everybody should have a say in what goes on. It's just unfortunate that it's reached a point where it's all or nothing. A line's been drawn that you either support this or you're against it, and I think that's probably the best way to describe about everything that goes on now, unfortunately.
Yeah. And what made you decide to go into education?
As soon as I left Wake, I moved to Riceville Beach, and I had been in Riceville Beach 3 weeks, and I said I'm going to take a little time off, and then maybe I'll go back to grad school, probably in the fall. I met this girl named Karen, and I didn't end up leaving and going back to grad school, but I was just taking some time off, and I was reading in the paper. I still read the paper every day, read you as well, and it was a lot of teachers were leaving. So I said, well, you know what? Now that I'm going to stay a little while, maybe I'll just teach if they'll hire me till I decide what's going to happen, where I'm going, what I'm going to do. I was in love. I was eating up with it. So I walked in the door to Human Resources. There was a gentleman behind the desk, Wallace West, finest human being as I've ever met. He said, what can I do for your son? I said, I've been teaching. He didn't say another word. He turned around, pushed the button, dialed on the old rotary phone. He said, Billy, I got one, hung it up. Turned back around and said, you know how to get to rolling rice? I said, what have you got? And he said, well, we need some teachers. We need some male teachers. And he said, Billy Mason's over at Rolling Rice. He's waiting for you. So I asked if I knew how to get there. I said, I don't even remember if I knew how to get there then, but I showed him the parking lot. He was in the parking lot waiting on me. He got a car. He said, can you start tomorrow? Now, that was my conversation.
That was your interview.
That was I never filled out a form, still haven't in my life. And I said, what am I starting? He said, I'm going to put you right upstairs, and he pointed at the two-story. He said, next to the bathroom. He said, you're young. He said, I've got several vacancies, and I'd like you to fill one of them. And, of course, I didn't have the whole picture. As I got into it, then I realized what the challenges were. I said, well, I don't know a thing about teaching language arts, social studies, block. And he said, oh, I'll help you. I didn't know a thing about teaching. I still see those students. They think I did, but I didn't. I tried. I learned a lot. I guess the bottom line is I absolutely fell in love with those kids, and the rest is history. So at the end of that year, they asked me if I would go to Chestnut Street School. I said yes. I went to Chestnut Street School, fell in love with those kids as well. And then by now, I'm super serious. I'm hoping she is too. And she's at Meredith College. And so...
Your wife, Karen.
Yeah. I said, okay, I'm going to Raleigh. I'm from Raleigh. I can stay with my parents if I want to. And then I'll go back to grad school. So I go to Raleigh. We get married her junior year at Meredith. She'll tell everybody too young. We were married 51 years. I went back to grad school, Chapel Hill, to get my master's in administration, educational administration, supervision. Anyhow, but I went to Carroll Junior High, which was 3 miles from my house, with North Hills, if you know anything about Raleigh. Principal's name, Carlos Hicks. Nice guy, and he hired me on the spot. I was surprised because, Mom, I had no educational background, but I did have experience, I guess. Then I got an assistant principal right out of grad school for 6 months, and then I went to Columbus County. Our goal was to get to Wilmington, and when I went to Columbus County, the soup said, I'll allow you to live in Wilmington and commute. So that sealed the deal, so I left in January.
Your last night as a school board member, you chose to recognize Karen, and she was crying because why do you think it was so moving for her?
I don't know if most people realize the challenges, both the good and the bad. I wouldn't say bad. It's every job has its perks. Some jobs require, I believe, you've got to be able to take a heavy load sometimes. It just goes along. And being a high school principal, particularly a large high school principal, is it's a challenge. My favorite saying is visibility, accessibility, and listening. I hope and think I did that. It's tough, but I know I interrupted more classes than anything else in the world because they hate it. They'd say, okay, Mr. McManus, come in the door. Let's just stop. Let him go and say something. I had a ball. I loved every minute of it, almost. But I had to make some hard calls. I'm not perfect. I have a saying that the teachers actually gave me a plaque. Everyone rises to the lowest expectation. And as I said the other night, I still believe that academics, the suits that suit a strong academic school, you've got to have discipline. Now, we can argue about the merits of that till the cows come home, but I believe that we need better discipline in our schools. That's another whole discussion. And I know this for a fact. If I have a good suit, I felt like I surrounded myself with good people and supported them and was loyal to them. And because I know that I believe a strong staff can run a school even with a lousy principal. Hope I wasn't lousy, but I truly believe that. So, and I was fortunate to work with some dynamite staff who loved the kids equally, cut up with them, were there, stayed after school. We did stay and tutor, and I think some of the kids will still talk about those staff members today. But, we're there for the students, but they got to behave. And when you're in a large high school, and before they built Ashley, we were very big.
At Hoggard.
Well over 2,000. And so I told the kids, we can't allow certain things. So here's what I'm going to do. I got to tell you, I love you. That was another saying. I love you, but with one T. I'd always say that. I still have kids come up to me, say, I know I love you with one T. But.
Well, what made you want to jump from being a teacher to an administrator, or did you fall into that? I know that teachers now, if they've reached, 10 years or so, hey, I might want to try my hand at this.
Well, after I taught, I just felt like hopefully I had some things to offer from my work history, being the same person, just being in charge. I felt like if everybody buys in, and that's another bless, the teachers, most of them bought in to what we were trying to do and how we were going to do it. And so they're the reasons of any successes that I've experienced, recognitions, is because of my staff.
And you have your experience in public school and private school. And when did you decide to take that job at Cape Fear Academy? And was it so different? I feel like there's a larger discussion, which we'll get to, between public and private school. And was it a different world there? And
I was approached if I was interested in coming to Cape Fear Academy. On paper, I had 33 years already with the state, so I could retire. I think principals can stay too long, even if they're really good. We're never forced to ever get out. But when I left and went to to Cape Fear Academy. Here's the difference for Cape Fear Academy. It's expensive. And so let's just be honest, you've got a strong socioeconomic. But Cape Fear Academy, I will say this because I was on the committee, you had to be academically strong. And so when you can do those two things, you're going to have a strong academic program. And the academy had a concerted effort to increase the minority population at that school. And when I left, they continue to do that. But they don't apologize that they want to have a strong academic while you're there. And there's some wonderful teachers there as well. So changing schools, I have to rebuild myself and have to renew myself as well with a whole new staff. And so that's part of what I've been able to do and enjoyed each moment of it.
And when did you leave Cape Fear Academy?
Well, I was there August of 17, and I was in my 10th year.
Okay, so we'll have to take a quick break. My guest is Hugh McManus, who recently rolled off the new Hanover County School Board. You're listening to The Newsroom. I'm Rachel Keith. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Newsroom. I'm your host, Rachel Keith, here with former school board member Hugh McManus. So, Hugh, what made you want to run for the school board? And that was, 2020? And the pandemic had already, started. And so I'd like to talk about, just in general, your experiences as a school board member.
I would say initially I just missed being involved in the educational arena, and I just felt like hopefully I would be put in a position where I could do things that benefited all of our students.
The pandemic was really hard on the school board. I mean, what did you learn from that experience in leadership? Because, every month you had the public coming out saying, you need to mask or you need to take the masks off. It was a very contentious period.
To me, that was the beginning of drawing a line. And I never dreamed how serious at that time people, how far they would go, right or wrong. But they were anti-mask. Okay, they have a right to be anti-mask. And they were masked. And the board at that time was mostly one political. And
Democrats.
Right.
Yes.
And I felt like in the interest of safety, we had teachers who were worried about going to work, pregnant, taking it home, children. So that had a lot to do with us mandating masks. But that was, to me, the beginning of the drawing of political lines.
Where the temperature rose.
Oh, yes. Yes, ma'am. So, and you know the history behind that. That was the first, it hit me that there's going to be some real strong divisional.
And what I've heard from you on the dais, and you all have had this discussion about how many emails you get, and you've said that you pretty much answer most of them, or all of them, because it's important for you to respond to constituents. And I've heard that you are very responsive. Why is that so important to you? Because it will take a long time. How many emails do you guys get?
Well, hopefully that amplifies what I've tried to say, is that I try to listen. It's one of those skills, and respond. And being a board member, I think, whether we like it or not, you've got to be accessible. I may have had 10 or 15 emails over my 4 years. They were absolutely nasty. And first couple, I said, if you send that again, I will not respond to you. And then, but over a period of 4 years, and I didn't. So to answer your question, but I respond to everybody else. I just felt like if to you, I know how I feel if I'm really, really upset about something, or even as a board member and principal, I want to have my say. I need to respond to them. And some of them were really, really good. Some of them were iffy. And some I had to send to the superintendent. Or I'd say, as a board, we do not make that determination. We do not get involved in discipline. Can you imagine with 26,000 students that we're handling discipline? I said, but you have a right to appeal any decision if the board, by a 4-3 vote, will hear you. So there is an outlet, and some people do. I just went to one of those last week. So
appeal a decision based on discipline as well?
Well, you can appeal, yes, I'm trying to package this. You can appeal certain decisions that deal with maybe your child's placement and discipline. You can appeal anything if you get 4 votes for the board to hear.
Okay, good to know. So one experience that took nearly a year to deal with was the book challenge process of Jason Reynolds' stamped Anti-Racism, Racism and You. And can you talk about this experience as well and what you learned about our community and your fellow board members through that whole process?
Both my wife and I have read the book cover to cover. I wanted to make sure that if I was going to have an opinion, I'd read the book. The best answer I could give you is I think I said it earlier, people have a right to have their own views. Your parents have a tremendous influence on you. That's fine. My parents did too. I try with my kids as well, still do sometimes. But I don't think anyone has a right to tell anyone else what you can read or what religion you can be or can't be or how you dress or how long your hair is or your opinion. So to ban a book is you're telling kids they can't read. Our AP, which I read during that time, the whole point of advanced placement is to present to those students different ideas. You're not asked to like the book, but you're probably going to be a leader in some shape, form, or fashion. Not that you're going to be a citizen and you're going to vote and some of you are going to run for office, et cetera. But you need to know what everyone else brings to the table. And so when you start banning books, I just disagreed with that. But that passed.
In my understanding, it was, quote, temporary and that it would be in the libraries, but it can't be in the classrooms. Is that still the case?
On paper it is. And to be honest with you, I've not had anyone say anything to me about that. But, of course, let's be honest, I feel like there was some intimidation that a lot of teachers had to deal with for quite a while there. Like, what's next? But,
you had teachers tell you that they were nervous about this precedent.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Of course.
When you were talking about the book Stamped, you said if you do this, this is going to be a slap in the face to the black community. But
Absolutely.
But they still did it.
Yes, ma'am. They did. And now they're working on, if I recall, LGBTQ. My answer to all of this, people say, well, again, definitives, as long as you behave, why should I worry how you feel, what you do? That's your business. Just behave. And that's been my motto. Like students, we're here to respect and support whether I like it or not or agree. Every student in our school system. And so my question is, are the policies reflecting and the decisions that have been made the best for all students?
And I know that throughout your tenure too, you've taken some strong stances, and the book challenge process was one of them. And you've been in this community for a very long time. You've served in various different roles. You know a lot of people here. Did you get any pushback, or did you lose friendships or acquaintances because of any stances you took?
Not to my knowledge. I've got I got a lot of friends that are strong Republicans, strong Democrats, strong independents. We don't discuss politics, and we've had agreements. We've had some friends that made it tough on us because all they want to do is talk about politics. And I said, my friendship's worth more than politics. But the board, you have to talk about. I mean, you're talking around it. But the bottom line is, come on, it's political. We all know that. Very political. And so, we try not to talk about politics. The board, each board member has an agenda. Some is they know about it. They've thought it out. They have collectively shared let's be honest. 4-3 vote has been a powerful vote for many years now. And what was interesting to me is there was, like, if I recall accurately, because we were celebrating, but I think the chair and the vice chair were 4-3 votes.
That's correct.
That speaks volumes already. 4-3 from the get-go. And so what's going to continue to happen? We'll see. I wish the public would have more input. We have and I'm not being negative, but we have the same people. I would almost feel safe in saying 80% minimum of the people in the crowd. You come.
I come. I see the same faces. You're correct.
Yeah. Faces almost all the time. And some of them get up and speak. That's their right. They say the exact same thing. That's their right. I support that. I have no problem with that at all. But we have, give or take, 26,000 students. Well, at least all of them have two parents. So you're talking 52, 53, and if they've been remarried, you're talking about 75,000. So take 75,000, and then you got about 50 of the same people all the time, and divide 50 by 50-something thousand, and tell me what percent of the community are coming to the board and participating or saying what they feel.
Yeah.
That's what bothers me. It's a small minority. Matter of fact, I'm not even sure it's a percent. If I recall, I think it's less than it has to be less than a percent.
So you want to see more people coming and participating in their government?
Well, I won't even identify. I just want to see people coming in and not the same group all the time who monopolize. And so when you get 4-3 votes, that tells you there's a division, a whole new board, and it's still 4-3 vote.
And I think it speaks volumes because now I'm seeing a lot of commentary and analysis about social media. And if they feel like they're posting something that I've gotten my opinion out there, but there's something to be said about showing up and looking at the board directly. Do you agree with that?
I got off social. I use social media, obviously, like all of us do, when I was running. But the second I was elected, I'm not on social media. I think social media, as good as it can be, in a mini, getting up with family, access to things, but it also is the worst that ever happened to some of our students and some of our staff. And social media will eat a child up. And then one child say something and their friends start saying something. I dealt with that after social media had its strong presence. They would post things. They would say things that weren't true. And then I've got a young lady or a young gentleman who now is depressed. They sit in front of the counselor's office all day. Their grades have gone to you-know-what because of social media. I'm telling you, it's destroying a lot of kids. I'm having a problem with having the cell phones out. I believe that the cell phones should not be visible during any instructional or meetings in a school. They can flip that baby out. The second they're walking out the door, but it better be non-visible when they walk in. If not, you take it. If you really look at the research for phones, it'll tell you that when cell phones are not in the classroom, academics goes up. Have you ever seen 5 or 6 or 8 kids sitting at a table? Are they talking? No. Look at adults. Go to a board meeting. I'm at the dais, and the adults are out there on their cell phones until it's their turn, or they'll put it down and stand up and clap, and then they'll sit back down and go back on their cell phone.
So we're not listening.
No, we're not. Thank you for saying that. You hit it perfectly. We are not listening.
And you've been very vocal about the cell phones, and now it's a national movement, it's a state movement, it's a problem that's affecting everyone. Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, he's compiled all the research to show how, like you said, how damaging social media is for developing minds and attention spans, because you need attention spans to focus on academics, to focus on your relationship, and that's not being exercised, right?
I would say the average individual, if you're driving by one of the high schools, if you drive by Hoggett or Hanover during class change, after school, look how many are talking, and then look how many got that cell phone looking down the whole time they're walking. It consumes them. I truly believe the academics, the behavior. I believe if someone posts something about a student on social media and it enters the school portal and it's having an adverse effect on one of our students, that at that point it now becomes a school issue. It was not, but now that it's affected one of my students, do I sit there and watch them gobble up some students? No. Maybe I got away with it, but I would call in parents of kids who posted. Because back then, before they had the Snapchat, bam, now it'll disappear. But if you know what you're doing, you can find out. And then I would call parents in, and I'd show them. I'd say, I'm asking you to stop this. Most of the parents would do it. They had no clue. But I hope this board will address that more. There
were other 2 controversial, the ones about professional standards of conduct and then the classroom display policy. And that goes along with Stamped, right? This is a lot of these are freedom of speech issues and issues to have differing opinions. And I know you were very vocal against those 2 policies.
Well, when you tell a teacher that they can't celebrate certain things that are academically related and or individually positive for a student or a staff member, you can't post things in your room. The counselor can't post things in their hallway, etc. You can't celebrate certain things. I'll just be honest, I think that's dangerous. I don't like where that's headed. I just worry about where we're headed and the division. And like I said, it's a 4-3 vote. That's not a strong way to start a new school year.
And going back to it being dangerous, is it because some opinions are being valued over others? Is that what you're thinking? Or saying that this isn't welcome, but this is?
You know, I get asked a lot about the dynamics, probably less now that I'm off the board. It's not about, the best way I can answer people today, everything is a vote. The bottom line, it doesn't make a difference what you say. Or maybe it does make a difference. You're on one side or the other. That's why people vote. And right now, everything's 4-3, almost, except for Dr. Barnes. And that was unanimous, which he well deserved. But back to it's very political. The board passed that policy, which eliminated postings of anything. So you can't put a kid's birthday up. You can't put Black History Month up. You can't put anything back to books. They are literally banning stuff. And that's, to me, that's scary, real scary.
Because, again, it's more control instead of...
Absolute control by vote. So the same group comes up and some people speak for X and some speak for Y. But the bottom line is who has the votes.
And throughout your tenure on the board, there have been a couple of pretty robust climate surveys that have been done by the state or the district locally. I mean, what do you see screaming out to you from these surveys over the past 4 years that you've been on the board that needs to have more attention?
We did an early survey, but its response was minuscule. So we really couldn't take a lot of validity from what that was. We decided to do another one, and to hold me to, I think I'm right, it was 72 or 73%, including certified staff, but that did it. We went through UNCW to get that done so that the school system, even the board, really didn't have access to all that the way it was handled. And it came back, again, over 300 pages. How do you ignore 73% of your staff, which is amazing? I mean, it was just amazing that we had that response. And you could say, okay, 25% of them lied. I don't think so. You still got 50%.
So what were the things that you felt like you're hearing over and over again?
Climate. You know, I go back to what I've always said I thought was strongest for me, and what I thought leadership was all about. And I can't always make everybody happy. Accessibility, visibility, listening. And that's what to us jumped off that survey.
All right, we'll have to take a quick break. I'm your host, Rachel Keith, and I'm here with former New Hanover County School Board member Hugh McManus. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the newsroom. I'm your host, Rachel Keith, here with former school board member Hugh McManus. In July of this year, the board did fire former superintendent Dr. Charles Faust. And so I want to see if you'd want to make any comment about how that happened.
Any personnel issues are done in closed session. We cannot talk about that.
Do you feel like you could comment? I mean, that decision was made after closed session very late at night, and people questioned that. Could you talk about the way that you all made that decision? Do you feel like you stand by that decision? We don't have to talk about him per se.
Yeah, but that's talking about him. I cannot comment on any personnel issue, not just Dr. Faust, any personnel issue, of which part of what we do, deal with the teachers, staff.
But even how the vote was taken?
I cannot discuss personnel issues.
Okay. All right, so now that we have interim superintendent Dr. Christopher Barnes, you've been on the dais praising him, saying that he's been a different type of leader. And I mean, you've said that you'd like to see him continue. I mean, would you like to see him be the next permanent, or what would you like to see in the next permanent superintendent?
Well, I think that Dr. Barnes, I think most people would agree. I feel certain most people would agree. I've heard it. I've been blessed that I have still a lot of former students that are in the school system, some in the office, teachers, administrators, and they share with me because I never went into the school critical, not one word, no matter what I saw, I never shared it. I was there just to be seen and walk through the school. But they do say things to me. Dr. Barnes has, as he has stated himself, he said, I have read the survey. I need to make some changes. And so back to what I've always thought, but his visibility, accessibility, and his, listening. And I know a couple people got mad at him about what he said, but he listened and he was accessible. So part of the survey include the whole central office arena. And so they've responded to that.
Would you like to see him stay?
Well, I have voiced that several times, and his contract was extended, but that was in public, so I'm not talking out of closed doors. Through the rest of the school year, and my rationale for that was the consistency that a new suit, no matter how good she or he might be, they don't know a thing. So he knows the schools. He was HR forever, 5 years. He knows what's going on. He knows the staff. They know him. They know their priorities. They know their finances, what's available. And so to keep that consistency and the positive arena for the rest of the school year. I like the fact that he says that his priority is not just academics, but it's the whole part of the child, which is monumental as well. Hopefully this board will reflect that in its policies. People just are excited. They like going to work. They like that they can complain. I mean, it's good. And I think the bus drivers, he rides buses.
He rides buses?
He's little buses, yes. So I think he's setting a great act to follow if he doesn't take it in the end. That'll be up to 4 votes.
And I wanted to go back to something about your relationship with your fellow board member, Pete Wildeboer. He's the former chair. And you two go way back, and you've talked about that, how you hired Pete Wildeboer at one point. And I know that you all have disagreed on a lot of policy. I mean, could you talk about, how you do maintain that friendship, but you have to get in the political arena together?
Pete and I go way, way back. And I did give Pete his first job at Trask. We were just close. After the election, he was next in line. And when Bill Reibart moved to the county commissioners, which reminds me, we got 2 former board members on the county commissioners, so hopefully that helps the school system. We haven't agreed on a lot, but he and I have talked. We still talk. As you saw us hug the other night, I love him. We're not on the same page with politics. I don't like the word politics. We're not on the same page with what I call priorities, which are best for all of our students. But he has a right to have his end, and I have a right to have mine. But we agreed a long time ago we would keep this friendship.
And we've talked about the cell phone policy and that you want to see that happen, but you've also been very vocal about passing students when they are failing. You've been very vocal about that.
I would tell you to look at the data which is available, and you look at the number of students who are entering. Might be going on 3 now. When we had like 1,500 kids, we were in a meeting, it was brought up that should have gone to summer school. They were below grade level. 1,500, that was elementary. They were 3rd graders, if I remember correctly. And I said, well, why did they have to go? And the answer was we didn't make them. They didn't have to. I said, well, we could have run buses. I said, we're passing kids to the next grade level because we can't make them come to summer school. I said, at some point, I still believe this, we're going to have to bite the bullet. We need a school for those students for far behind. If you look at some of the statistics which you're aware of, available in the book that's put out about every individual school, tell me how kids who are reading 1 and 2 grade levels below, taking the state exams, have never passed, never been proficient on a state exam, but they're graduating from high school. And so I yelled out one night, let's give all of the seniors in our high schools the 8th grade competency test unofficially. I'd just be curious to see how many. That'll tell. And so passing kids, when I brought that up in the meeting, they said, well, you don't know what you're doing to their mental. I said, well, I understand that part. Well, what do you think we're doing to them? If they're graduating from high school, they can't read and write, and then their math skills are below, and then you're going to send them out into the world, which repeating a grade's not the end of the world, or having to go to summer school to go to the next grade, or take it Monday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday or 3 days or 2 and taking 10 minutes off of every other class and having a special class just for these kids for another reading. I mean, we've got to get out of the box. We just are passing kids. And I challenge anyone to find that data that.
What can fix this? Do you feel like it's more pre-K education? What is it? Because we do see huge gaps between black and white students, between Hispanic and white students.
Well, unfortunately, the reality is, and I made a living with this arena, socioeconomics is the single most important variable as a rule. Oh, there are exceptions to everything. And so unfortunately, we have a lower socioeconomics arena where it's just education is, for whatever reason, is not the priority. I mean, when I came home, my parents, if I drew an X, they put it on the refrigerator like I won the Nobel Peace Prize. They read to me. They went on trips. I said one night, not too long ago, I said, we need to have a year-round school, and we're going to put those kids in there who are way below grade level. Now, it's going to be predominantly black and Hispanic folks, but those are the facts. That's data. That's not personal. They're going to learn, they're going to read, and they're going to do math. Those are the two essentials to make it in this world today, particularly in the CTE arena. Number two, I said you can have intersessions, 4, which is usually year-round. During those intersessions, you take a certain group, or which I'm sure we could if we had the right monies, and then they go somewhere within a half a day drive where they've never been. They go see something. They experience something. They go in the mountains. They go through the streams. They drive the road, things these kids have never seen. Take them to Atlanta. We have kids who still haven't been to the beach or the mountain, but hopefully that'll push a button. But I just feel like we've got to do something rather than just pass them. And we're passing them.
I mean, some things are out of the school board's control, like poverty. But, I mean, do you still feel like redistricting's the answer? I mean, that's hard in this political climate. Or what is it?
Well,
because it sounds like, I mean, the research shows that if the school is more socioeconomically diverse, the kids are going to do better than just concentrating poverty in certain schools.
That's a great question. We have, if you remember the last meeting, we have schools that are 250 kids over capacity, elementary. People are moving, let's be honest, people tend to move to where the schools are successful on paper. I mean, that's a given. And so you can redistrict. That's going to take a lot of work because when you redistrict, you're going to be busing again. And if that's what everybody agrees, but busing kids from, I don't think anybody wants to be bused, to answer your question. We got a lot of work to do on schools to increase the size. Look at River Road, Mary C. Williams, busting it to see. They're building, as you and I are talking, I'm not sure there's any land left to build. Apartments. This town is a destination. What's the average home? $500,000 now? Goodness, glad I got mine years ago. But so, fair question. But there's a lot of work that's got to be done, and a lot of people have to be brought in to talk to make sure this works for everyone and not one group or other suffer because of it. And unfortunately, historically speaking, when you do redistrict, the black students are the ones who end up getting bused. If that's what the black community wants, they need to share that. I think that would be another discussion. The one thing that you and I've talked about is not play politics, listen to the community and see what we can do based on what the community thinks is best for our students.
Another big wrench that you continue to bring up is the cost sharing with charter schools. And now we have a bill that just passed that will divert $6.5 billion to private school vouchers over the next decade. And it's interesting because in this past election, states like Nebraska, Colorado, and Kentucky put it on a ballot measure and they all failed. So it's interesting, this dynamic that and you've been very vocal about the diversion of public taxpayer dollars to things like charters and private schools.
Everybody knows I worked in a private school after I retired from the state. Everybody has that choice. I don't care where you go to school. If you think a school's better for you or you liked it or it's closer or whatever.
You have the means?
And you have the means. But we have lost, I think it was 3 years ago, out of our fund balance that we were told to spend down to begin with, which we did to our demise. We spent $6.5 to $8 million. They took that out of our fund balance. Last year, they took out $7 million, rounded off. This year, $7 million. So that's almost $21 million so people say we didn't do the budget correctly. We did with what we had.
And that was to charters, not private.
I'm not against charter. I'm not against private. I worked at a private school. But it's not fair to take the money from the public and give it to all I ask is this. We're tested. The whole world knows our data, our school success. Most charter schools, they don't do lunch, they don't run buses. The staff has no required certification. Neither does the administration. They don't have athletics. They don't have to take a state exam. We don't know how well they're doing. So all I ask is, if the legislature wants that, then give them $7 million more, which they've still got hundreds of millions over the Leandro, which was for low-performing arena. And that's been, I can't remember how long, 25 years?
So you wish the Leandro case would have gone forward and that money would have been dispersed to the public schools?
It hasn't been dispersed yet. That's a lot of money.
It doesn't look like it's going to be.
But back to your answer, it just don't penalize the public schools for it. I mean, that's like saying we're going to make the private schools pay the public schools because we lost their money. Just appropriate that money for charter if that's what you want to do, but don't take it away from us. And that bothers me because I think that public ed's in trouble.
You think public education's in trouble?
Yes, ma'am. I do. I'm sure people get upset when I say that, but I do.
Well, Dr. Barnes has made a point of saying that the pupil allotment for teachers has not changed in a decade.
Well, in defense of teachers, which they well deserve, all employees. So in the state, glad they did it, gave raises 2 or 3 years. County commissioners we got the fourth or
Yes,
maybe
the fourth
supplement in the state, and that was great. But we get to those 500 locals, and you have to give them, which we should, the raise, the extra money, the Social Security contributions, the health contributions, the retirement contributions. That's where that $7 million that there hurts. And so, I don't know, I just don't feel like we should lose that money.
And then
Now, if you want, I'd love to see them start testing the charter schools.
in the private schools
Well,
that accept the voucher money.
those that accept the voucher money,
Do you want to see, did you support this voucher expansion?
not the way it presently is, but that's because they're taking money away from the boards of ed across the state.
Because, $6.5 billion over a decade, that's a lot of money not going to the public education. I understand that the GOP says that they're going to, the legislators who passed this bill, that they're still providing for all of these different pockets, but it is still a chunk of money that is not going to be appropriated to a public education system. But their rationale is that the money follows the child.
That's another discussion.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the public system is set up so that those monies are vastly important to maintain the programs and the staffing that we have. Again, the legislature's loaded with money. They've loaded. $7 million is probably not even in the percent. If that's what they want to do, just don't take it from the local school board.
Well, I think I'm going to move on to closing our conversation today. And I wanted to ask you, in your entire several decades career, was there an educational moment that you were most proud of, or that you are really proud to be an educator or be in the school system? Is there a specific thing you can remember?
Well, there's a lot. If I say what I've been fortunate to be recognized during my lifetime for some outstanding awards as principal, and I served on the NAA National Association of Secondary School Principals Board for 4 years, which was large high schools. We met in Chicago and we met in New Orleans, and then I was on the National Merit Board for 4 years. But when we won the National Blue Ribbon at Hocker, that's the highest award that a public school can receive. And that goes to my staff who bought into me, and I bought into them, and they were wonderful. And when I say staff, which I'm as guilty as a lot of people, when we talk about our school successes, I know I did it, but I wish I'd done a much better job of it. You got to support your cafeteria staff. You got to support your custodians. You'd be amazed the kids who relate to custodians and SROs. And when I ran, they wanted to do it with SROs. Are you kidding me? But custodians, they identify. And I just think that it takes everyone to make it successful. And that's where I've been fortunate, is I've had such wonderful staff that made me look good. Matter of fact, they could have probably done it without me.
When was that blue ribbon designation? Do you remember?
Yes, ma'am. That was 89, 90. Well, they spent when they come, I was a site visitor for the Blue Ribbon Committee. They sent me way up north, Michigan. That's another whole story.
Okay.
They come in, every book, every academic, everything is spread out on tables. They can walk down the hall, as we did. They'll hand out a yellow card to custodians go in the cafeteria, parent walked in the door, say, we're having a meeting, we want to talk to you about the school. So they talk to teachers one-on-one. They talk to me, they talk to parents. So you talk to everybody in that school, bus drivers. No one was left out of it. And then they make a determination.
Was there a moment too, because some people are having these moments when we're so divisive and partisan. I mean, has there been a time where the cynicism got to you or apathy got and said you just throw your hands up and say, I want to give up?
I don't think I've ever given up on anything that I felt passionate about. I'm a big talker. I know a couple people talk a little more than I do. I like to think that comes from my being a principal. I mean, I had to talk all the time. And I represent the whole school. I was the final, so I guess that came to me. But I'm trying to learn this times not to be too vocal. I think we all can do that, because that comes back. If you talk too much, it comes back and it hurts. Because most people listen. What's the attention span? And so when you start running your mouth, and I guess it comes to me naturally. I like to be a jokester, so I like people to laugh, and I laugh at myself. But I think that just sometimes you can overdo it. And so if you're going to respond, you need to try to save up so you can.
So when
I've been fortunate. I have been blessed. I really have.
What's your hope for our school community or our new Hanover County community? I mean, what do you hope for the students, for them?
You know, it sounds like an old cliche, but students are the future. If I were back as a principal, high school principal today, probably in collusion with my teachers and counselors, suggest to students that they seriously consider that they do their homework on where the jobs are today. And if you're going to a 4-year and you're having to chip in and you're going to major in subject areas that the jobs are not there, they're just not there, and then you're going to go into debt. I would almost recommend, except for those who are extremely, of which I was not, math, which takes care of the tech early, that you consider going to a community college or for at least a year. You can work, get an idea of what it's like for different accountability, but you also don't have to go in debt. You can go to the school part-time if you want to and work. You grow up a little bit, maybe a bit, because you have to learn how to balance and understand. And then, after that year, you learn more about where the jobs, what's your interest. You may take a class, you said, I'd never do that. If you told my friends in high school, maybe even college, that I was going to be a high school principal, the only thing that would surprise them more is like I was a cardinal to the Pope. I mean, I was not bad in high school, but I was different.
Okay.
I was different. So being a high school principal, that was the last thing I thought I'd do. But to answer your question, please, please, please do not lose focus. For all of our students, that's every single student and what they bring to the table. And what we do with them, if I remember research, I'm sure you've read that, by the third grade, unfortunately or fortunately, third grade is a master turning point when you look at the data for students. But I think we're passing kids. It's not going to kill kids to have to go to summer school every summer.
Get the resources to them and their families so that they can go, because that's an issue.
Back to the 7 million. I mean, because that charter buddy you can use for homeschool, virtual school, transportation, books, tutoring, as well as tuition. So again, just let us have our money, and I'll just appropriate money for them. And that meets their expectations and continues to support public schools, because public schools are going to have to be supported.
All right. Hugh McManus, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your dedication to the profession of education.
Thank you, but I'll say again, I'm only as good as people that I work with.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for this episode of The Newsroom. Thanks to my guest, Hugh McManus, for joining me on the show today, and to Ken Campbell and Ben Schockman for technical support. If you missed any part of this program, you can find it at WHQR.org or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have comments, concerns, or an idea for a future show, email us at newsroom@WHQR.org. I'm Rachel Keith. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us for the next edition of The Newsroom.